amorphous pseudopod.
Hi, my name is Justin.
And I'm Pam.
And we like to talk about monsters.
We certainly do, Justin. What are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about mimics.
Mimics.
Yeah.
Like the chest full of teeth D&D don't get your hand bitten off mimic?
Yes, we're going to talk about those. But they may have originated in D&D, but they have moved so far beyond all of that.
They have.
Yeah. So way back in like 1974, they were made up by a guy named Gary Gygax. He was one of the founders of Dungeons and Dragons, and he was looking for stuff to fill dungeons or castles or caves with, and he loved traps of all kinds. He was a big fan of making it a requirement to have a 10-foot pole to poke at floors and ceilings, and adventurers soon found out they should also poke at containers or other stuff.
Other objects.
Yeah.
Hence the mimic.
That's right. So the mimic was a creature that was kind of an amorphous blob that could change its shape to disguise itself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Amorphous blobs.
Yeah.
Gooey.
It's so much worse than just that.
Great. I'm interested to see what you found out in your research for this, because when you picked your topic, we were like, where did they originate? Did they come from folklore or mythology? And we didn't know. So we thought it would be a cool topic to kind of delve into.
Yeah. Like,
and
say a dungeon
yeah,
filled with traps and mimics.
exactly. Yeah.
So the short version is Gary Gygax made them up. They're sort of inspired by like just shapeshifters in general. They're not the original versions were not complicated. They were basically like a living trap that was something different other than like a poison dart or pitfall or something like that. But
Spiced it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Add a little bit of spice to your dungeon adventure.
That's right. So the original versions, everybody knows of like a classic treasure chest mimic. But those are actually more prolific in games than they were in the original descriptions of them.
Oh.
Yeah. The original descriptions, a mimic could fill like a space as any kind of object. It didn't have to be just a chest. It was just in video games that was like, hey, here's our loot box. We're gonna make this loot box attack the player. That was a new thing that was introduced in video games.
Well, I mean, I can see why.
Yeah. They were pretty easy to just sub in, and you didn't have to change like the default model or sprite for a treasure chest. You just had to do different stuff with it. So it was kind of an easy way to jump scare players.
Yeah.
But yeah, the original versions could fill like a space, so it wasn't always just a chest. They could be
an entire room or something.
the really big ones. Yes, they could be like
they're based on size, are we?
Yeah, some of them were. Now the original description says that they could fill like 150 square feet. So that could be anything from like a statue or like a coffin or like a really big urn or something like that. They weren't just a chest.
So original description, are we talking like when were they created exactly? Like original description.
1974.
So we're going in the Wayback Machine.
He had them ready to go in the first Monster Manual. So
wow.
this invention happened before like the release of any D&D books.
That's kind of impressive, though,
Yeah.
coming up with something like that prior to other creative input and everything. Like, just on your own, just coming up with something cool to eat people.
Yep.
Or players, not real people, but to eat
Yes.
players in a game.
The original versions didn't actually even have teeth.
What did they have? Giant, like, sloppy gums or something?
No,
just
they would,
not or did they absorb them like a gelatinous cube or something?
I guess they kind of did. Didn't really give specifics on how it would like eat stuff. until like much later. We'll get there.
I'm
So
sorry, am I jumping you ahead too much by asking all these questions?
Fine. It's fine. So the mimics didn't actually have teeth until later editions, and actually it was the video game versions that introduced the teeth to make them look scarier than just a treasure chest that flaps its lid at you.
So, like, what kind of video games are we talking about here?
Okay, so there was
Like,
a very
which ones?
very long list. I think the first video game that incorporated a mimic was actually Ultima, which was a PC game back in like 1980. Yeah, Ultima, the first Ultima game, going way back.
Not a D&D game.
It was sort of
Was
like
it
D&D.
based
It was
off of
it was like a
D&D?
fantasy RPG style game.
Okay.
And you could encounter a lot of things that could be found in D&D. But yeah, they go really deep across many video games now. Basically, any game that has a treasure chest system, you can probably guess that at least one of those treasure chests in the games is going to be a mimic.
Well, honestly, why not?
Yeah.
I think it's become a pop culture integration,
Yeah.
like an item. It's just something that's like a known monster that,
Right.
It doesn't stem from mythology. It's like finding a minotaur in a labyrinth or something. You're gonna find
It's almost a trope now.
It's a trope. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. It's like yeah, and a certain percentage of chests that you find or are probably going to be a mimic.
That's right. So I actually have a whole bunch of pictures because they're all over the place. So this is more like what their original descriptions looked like. And they were more than just like a basic chest.
Pictures.
They were, they could also be like a stone sarcophagus or like a clay urn or something like that.
Look at this one. He's got a little tendril coming out.
Yeah,
and
getting
he's
ready
gonna,
to
like,
sucker
smack
punch
someone.
him. The other thing you might notice is that
That's like suggestive.
a little bit. A little bit. Actually, the second picture here is depicting their other means of ensuring that the players don't get away from them once they start swinging. They could secrete a very sticky goo to trap players nearby so that they could not escape their pummeling tendrils.
Fascinating.
Yes. I'm sure this has inspired a lot of other things.
I'm sure it has.
So, the original versions were basically just like kind of mindless creatures. They didn't do much other than give players like a jump scare and scar them for life whenever they found any kind of container or object in a room.
I suppose a jump scare in that scenario only really works if your dungeon master is particularly good at their job.
Yep.
And or if there's an off chance that you might actually die from some of these scenarios, or your character might actually perish. Otherwise, like, who cares if it's a mimic and he like gives you a little chomp on your arm or something?
Yeah.
Unless there's
Well,
sort of
it depends. A good dungeon
bad
master
outcome.
would put them at like the far end of the room, and the characters would fight their way through all the stuff in the room, and then to be like, yeah, now we get to open up this treasure chest. So they run up, and suddenly they get stuck to it and socked in the face by what they thought was going to be their reward.
I can imagine the first game where that was introduced, and the reactions off of that. I think that would be entertaining.
Actually, it's a relatively new phenomenon, but all of the streaming that's happening for games, you get to see people's reactions for the very first mimic they encounter now. And you can even tell, like, the veteran gamers who are just like, oh, I just got attacked. This game has mimics. Oh. And then for the rest of the game, they always poke at a treasure chest with their weapon or whatever.
Pavlov's.
Yeah. Pavlov's bell, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Trained responses. Like I said, the mimics were pretty basic, mindless creatures that would attack until the summer of 1983, when Dragon Magazine, which had been running for a few years by this time, and had its long-running ecology series where they talk about different creatures and monsters and the habitats that they inhabit, and they just give you more background stuff and story hooks. A guy by the name of Ed Greenwood, who you might know from such fame as the inventor of the Forgotten Realms, was prolific in his writings for all things Dungeons and Dragons for a very long time. He loved to make up stuff about monsters and fill in a lot of the gaps in their lore.
That's cool.
Yeah, so he actually came up with he released an article called "The Ecology of the Mimic" from Dragon Magazine number 73. That's a picture of the cover. Or sorry, 75. My bad. Dragon Magazine 75. I really enjoyed the Ecology series in general. One of my friends had a subscription, and I would always read the Ecology so I could learn more about other stuff. They just had neat little filler stories.
How long ago was this?
Oh,
For the youngins out there?
I didn't get into this until the 90s, but the Ecology of the Mimic in...
I love it. Sorry. I love how you're like, I didn't get into this until the 90s.
Yeah. But...
1990s.
Yeah, so in 1983, the monthly edition of Dragon Magazine for July was number 75. So it had already been going on for quite some time at that point. And they just kept going with it for a long time. So in the Ecology of the Mimic, Ed Greenwood described your basic mimic, and then he gave some... He tried to fill in some weird anatomical things for how they could shapeshift. They were like some sort of massive muscle, and they could, almost like an octopus, they could like shift around its structure and harden its outer layers of skin. And he also went on to say how it would designate certain patches of its skin to be like sensory organs, kind of like eyes, but not quite
he went
eyes.
Right
yeah,
into
he went
detail
way
on
deep.
this thing.
Yeah,
like cryptozoology.
Exactly.
Mimic.
He loved this stuff, and he still writes today.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can follow him on Twitter.
Yeah. Question about mimics when they're not looking like something else, mimicking something else. What do they look like?
Kind of like if you took like a xenomorph alien from the Alien series, but without a shell. Kind of fleshy, pseudobody, weird, non-human.
What?
Yeah. They don't have a shape. That's why they're amorphous.
Okay, but having an alien that doesn't look like an alien, that's still a shape. If it looks
Sort
like
of.
an alien without a shell, it's still a shape of an alien.
It was kind of a blobby thing that could extrude, pseudopods and tendrils to pull itself along.
So you think a xenomorph without its shell...
That was the best I could come up with at the time.
It doesn't have muscles and things? It's just...
I mean, it would,
blobby?
But they've got an exoskeleton.
Okay, true. The exoskeleton is what allows it to keep its shape, just like our skeleton lets us keep our shape.
Endoskeletons.
Yes, and not flop around on the ground like a pile of goo.
So in addition to this sort of weird physiology thing, which he also says fluid from the mimic could be used to make like polymorph spells or potions because they're shapeshifters.
Ho ho.
Oh.
I can see wizards targeting these.
Yep, that was part of the whole reason for
Add through their little
Ecology.
Apothecary collection.
Yeah, the
What you got in that file?
the older versions
Mimic juice.
of D&D were actually pretty grim when it came to saying, oh, you can use these parts for this or this part for that, for all kinds of different stuff.
Oh man, yeah. Sorry.
I'm pretty sure
that's cool. That's gross.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool.
I'm pretty
And
sure
also very gross.
The Monster Hunter games actually kind of probably drew some inspiration for some of that, because you can use all of the monster parts for different
Well,
stuff.
to be honest, everything is drawn its inspiration off of something else. There really isn't anything that's completely original anymore. It's just sort of derivatives of everything else. It's not like a true derivative, but it's like let's not get into that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that one has no bottom.
It doesn't have a bottom.
The other thing he mentioned is that some mimics were actually not mindless, but they were sort of clever creatures. And if you had encountered a mimic, it didn't always have to end in combat. You could,
Tickle its chin hairs.
I guess, with the 10-foot pole, give it a prod.
Hey, you.
But yeah, you could actually like barter with a mimic.
Okay, what does a mimic want?
What does a
that
mimic want?
I could barter with it?
Food. Mimics love to eat stuff.
So okay.
So it would actually some
Not
of them
like coins or jewels or things,
according
but
to
like meaty pieces.
yeah, stuff it can actually eat because it's already got coins and stuff that it's found
Does it
from lying
have
around.
coins and stuff, or is it mimicking
if it
the
knows
coins
other
and
creatures
stuff?
find this stuff valuable, it collects that kind of stuff, and then it would like trade it for food, according to Ed Greenwood.
Okay.
They also, because they just lurk in dungeons around other creatures, sometimes they picked up on like what these other creatures were up to, where they were, maybe how many they were. All of this stuff is pretty valuable to an adventuring party.
Can it not be an inanimate object? Can it be like a goblin or something? Like, can it blend into like a goblin tribe and pretend to be a goblin?
The original mimics, no, but later versions, there was a type of mimic that could.
So it could be like people.
Yeah.
Like
The
babies and baby prams.
Yeah, and in
crying for their mommies.
Yeah, waiting
in the square.
Yep.
So lonely, so sad.
Just waiting to grab someone.
Or barter for meaty bits.
Yeah. Oh man, can you imagine like the talking baby guy from Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah, but I'm thinking creepier.
Yeah.
Like that would be a good horror
It would be.
adventure sideline.
So the later mimics, they did have like more variety in later editions of D&D, but the old school versions, they just sort of had your like mindless variety and your more clever variety. If you had a group of mimics, they were clever enough to coordinate their disguises.
Oh.
Yeah. So you could have like a group of like large urns or sarcophagi, or maybe a dinner table and chair set.
Dinner table.
Yeah.
Just the mimics are laying their own dinner today.
That's right.
Laying their own dinner today.
Setting their own table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mimics are setting their own table today.
Yeah. Actually, that one has been carried through, and someone has made a miniature set out of it. So you can actually buy a set of minis from a third-party person. They have like a chair, a wardrobe, the classic chest.
That's cool.
This one is a table. That's a potted plant. That's an urn.
Do we have the name of this person who did these?
Yes, we will put a link in our description for that because they are pretty sweet.
Cool.
So these more intelligent mimics, Ed Greenwood suggested that if they were to end up in combat and they felt like they were outmatched, they would actually try to like run away, and if they could get around like a corner or something, they would turn into like a piece of the scenery and try and hide from the party, and maybe come back to pester them another time. So he suggested,
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like they would follow you?
Yeah, maybe. Like you guys
What?
are jerks. I'm gonna come after you.
Oh, that's way
Maybe
more
get you
creepy.
while you try to nap.
That's way more creepy than I came across a chest once, and that chest was a mimic.
Yeah.
That's like I might be stalking you
And how would you
for
know?
lunch. And how would you? How would you
How
know?
would you know?
You wouldn't know
Yeah.
unless you pass some sort of check or whatever.
And poke and prod at literally everything. Yeah.
So if you didn't kill those mimics and they got away,
Yep.
you would literally have to be on guard about everything else. I mean,
Yep.
if your campaign was set like such.
So they could look like any inanimate object.
Like your bag.
Maybe not a bag, but eventually, maybe.
Like that rock you rested your head on.
Yeah. They like I said, they would round like a corner and break line of sight, and then they would turn into a rock, maybe, or like a stalactite hanging from the ceiling, or maybe even a section of wall.
That part's not the creepy part. The
wanna
creepy
lose-
part is the following you.
Yeah. If a mimic wants to barter, maybe do that.
But
Steal his hook.
how do you... If it runs away, you don't even get to that barter point. How are you going to figure out if it's going to barter or not? Okay. So that's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's baby in a pram creepy.
Yeah.
But on a whole nother pet
Come back to
cemetery
haunt
murder
you.
baby level.
Yeah. So that wasn't even like the creepiest story hook that Ed wrote about. He suggested one famous mimic story, which of course he made up to put into this article.
Famous. So good.
Yeah, a mimic found its way to like a town square in the middle of like a big town, and it replaced the big statue in the middle of the town square.
What did it do with the statue?
Probably dropped it into the sewer grate that was right next to it,
Assumptions.
which somebody noticed 2 years later was starting to get pretty full of human and animal bones.
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good story hook, I think.
Yeah, that one's really good too.
It's kind of a murder mystery
Who done it?
monster.
It's
Yeah,
the statue. It's the Weeping Angels
that's right.
from Doctor Who, except it's a mimic.
Mm-hmm. So,
Weeping Angel.
weeping mimic.
Weeping mimic.
Since then, it has spread far and wide through all kinds of video games. And it, of course, is a staple in tabletop RPG games.
It's a classic monster.
Yeah.
It's a classic monster that's not a
mythological
classic
one,
mythological monster. Yeah.
It's become legendary in its own right now. So, like I said earlier, video games started to use this idea of the mimic as a way to like get the player. And like I said, the first one was Ultima from like 1980. Dragon Quest 3 and 5 both had mimic chess. Dragon Quest 5 had a clay pot version that they called the Unexpected. I love a good pun. It was good.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Toe Jam and Earl, which actually had 3 different games made of it, was a Sega Genesis game where you were a pair of alien rappers who crash landed on Earth.
That sounds so familiar to me, and I don't think I played it, but I didn't actually have a Sega Genesis, but that just
So I remember
sounds familiar. It's
I
like
actually
one of those things.
played the first one or the second one.
I'm
and
really
they had,
shocked by that.
Yeah, I think we rented it back when you could go to a store and
And rent games.
rent stuff like video games or movies. Yeah, and they had the mailbox monster, which looked like a big like postal box.
So
And,
these were like the first ones.
they
where
were
it was
the
showing up.
loot chests from this game, and you could go up and smash them and get loot out of them. But these
Or
ones,
get a monster in the face.
yeah, and if you watched the mailboxes long enough, they would blink. That would be like their telltale sign that something was off. That was actually a pretty running theme through all of the D&D versions. Is that
The amount of creativity that goes into some of these, just
the mimics
So
were mimics. They weren't perfect disguise artists. They were pretty good, but if they were trying to like mimic a wooden treasure chest, maybe you'd notice some of the wood grain didn't look right, or
that's like that cake show
yeah.
that
Is
you
it-
have to guess which
Oh,
one is
that'd-
cake
I want to see
and which one is
the mimic
like
version of this, but
not cake.
instead of like the host going up to cut the cake, the contestants go up and they have to prod to find out if it's a mimic.
Find out if it's a mimic.
Yeah,
You'd be alive or dead today.
that's right. Put that into your D&D game.
Poke
I want to
the
hear
mimic.
about that.
It's like sounds like some sort of twisted game that kobolds would come up with. Comment down below if you played any of these games.
Yeah.
Because you be old like us.
So I've got a list of other games here. Zelda Ocarina of Time had mimics that pretended to be doors. So that was in the mid 90s. Munchkin, which is a parody card game
Munchkin.
of D&D, actually had a monster that was a level 8 gazebo. And it's just straight up a mimic. It's a mimic. But, their version. Final Fantasy, Diablo, Dragon's Dogma, EverQuest. All of these have like your classic treasure chest mimic. The Dark Souls series of games also features mimics as chests with like really big gangly arms and legs. And it would like try to grapple a player and like chomp on them. But yeah, they were like 12 feet tall and would grab a hold of you and chomp on you. And actually, they
That's
released...
a no thanks from me.
It's, full of teeth.
I thought they looked cool in the previews for that game.
Yep.
And then I decided that wasn't a game for me. And not necessarily because of those creatures.
They are not easy games. A bunch of years back, they actually released some concept art. The developers of the Dark Souls games, they're called From Software. They released concept art of rejected mimics that they never actually used in the games because they thought that they were too evil.
They were too evil?
They were too evil.
This one, they're more evil than this one?
More evil than the treasure chest one. So one of them was a ladder mimic.
I don't understand how this is more evil than this one.
You also take fall damage in the game. So if
this just looks creepy.
Yeah. But the really bad one was the bonfire mimic. So the bonfire in the Dark Souls series is your rest checkpoint where you're like, all of your stuff gets restored.
Yeah, I just read that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess they decided that was too evil to trick the players with a fake bonfire that attacks them.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You get through a section and like...
That's like smashed computer monitors and controllers.
That's a controller through a TV screen.
Yep. So even more recently than the Dark Souls couple of games, Call of Duty Black Ops
Really?
Cold War had a zombie infestation or zombie invasion mode where they included mimics as like a loot crate or an ammo drop or a weapon crate. And you could walk up to it thinking, oh, I'm going to get a new weapon or a reload.
But because
but
zombies.
It jumps up and is this gigantic, 10-foot tall ogre-looking thing instead.
That's, well, a lot of this is my things I didn't know today, but that's an unexpected thing that I didn't know today.
Yeah, like Call of Duty, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected Call of Duty to have mimics at all.
And there's actually a new and upcoming game called Dark and Darker, which is like a first-person dungeon crawler meets battle royale, where you and a couple of friends can jump into a dungeon facing off against whatever enemies are in the dungeon, plus other players that are also in the dungeon.
And mimics?
And the mimics will randomly replace one or more of the treasure chests. Maybe in a future version. Wouldn't that be something? So yeah, all of these games mean that you get to watch streamers have their first or thousandth encounter with mimics, where they go either freak out like early PewDiePie, or they go, this game has mimics.
So do they have any grounds in mythology or cryptozoology?
Not really that I could find.
Except for the doppelganger thing.
Yeah.
Which would be some sort, like, I'm thinking a doppelganger. I'm assuming, like, doppelgangers are out there in the mythological and cryptozoology sense. So
yeah.
If they're based off of doppelgangers, then okay, they have a background in it, I suppose.
Yep. That's about as close as I could find. And in like a lot of TTRPGs, there are doppelganger creatures already that sort of fill that niche. This was more of a
Well,
an extra thing that was more unexpected than like, oh, the floor falls away into a spiked pit kind of thing.
I am like it's sort of a trap, but it's a monster as well.
Yep.
Like I would say it still falls in within that doppelganger thing since it's a sentient being. It's not just a trap that somebody has set. Like
Yeah.
it's not like people are placing mimics around and to guard their treasure.
Yep.
You know, these are creatures that have moved into this space, so I feel like they're fall more into the doppelganger category of things.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm somewhat disappointed, but also not in the fact that they are like not based on anything in mythology.
Anything in particular, you mean?
Yes. I'm not disappointed in the sense that I feel like it's kind of exciting and interesting to be part of something like in a time period where something that was created that has huge prevalence in gaming
Yeah.
still today. Like,
Oh, yeah.
that was made not that long ago from our perspective. And it's in a lot of in fantasy games, like we said, it's become a trope that you see all the time. And I think that's really cool. Like even
Yeah.
our kids know mimics from Minecraft, not from Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
But from Minecraft. So if they see a mimic, it's, oh, a mimic from Minecraft. Like in Minecraft. And we have to remind them that, no, it's not.
Stuff exists outside of Minecraft.
It wasn't invented in Minecraft. It came prior to that. But who invented the mimic? Gary Gygax.
Yeah. Who's that guy?
Who's that guy?
Actually, you kind of landed on sort of an overall theme that mimics sort of have, and it all revolves around getting people who are impatient with greed. Yeah. If
I would say thieves are a high market category for mimics then.
Yeah.
They probably have the best meat.
Yep. Probably. They were also pretty squishy compared to like a fighter. But, maybe an encounter with a mimic could be more rewarding to the players who are less greedy and try negotiating or at least like noticing or attempting to prod at it with that 10-foot pole. See if it twitches.
I don't know. Do you think if you poked one, he might be a little bit offended and not want to trade with you at that point in time?
Maybe. Guess that depends on the player's next move.
I guess.
Yeah.
That's up to your DM, I suppose.
If you were impatient and like just went to go like rush and open up a chest rather than like tending to your wounds or something, and you had to fight another mimic when the party's already like low, that's like serious times for your party, especially back in the old days when everything was so unforgiving. An encounter like that could be like the end of a party.
Yeah.
Mimics haven't really been around in monster lore for very long, but they've spread very far and wide and become a large part of the ecology of the gaming world, well beyond just tabletop RPGs.
So thanks, Gary Gygax and Ed Greenwood, for giving us such iconic monsters.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Pam. If you like this video, don't forget to smash that like button with a big old monster paw.
And hit that subscribe and notification bell so you can hear more about future monsters from us. And be sure to tell us what you want to hear about next in the comments down below. That's all for now.
Bye.
Bye.